One time I was working with a founder and he got a nice pre-seed round
Yep.
and he was killing it. Knew his numbers, customer acquisition costs, everything was in line. The guy was an animal,
Hmm.
totally fantastic. I supported him. And then he went for a seed round. And then later on, he couldn't get a seed round, even though he had the metrics. And the number one reason they came back to me and said, you have not hired an executive. You have not
Hmm.
landed that landmark hire.
Okay.
And so we don't see you as someone who can run a big company. We don't see you. If we fund you, you can't bring on the staff. You're not going to be able to scale to the 3,000 people to build
Yeah,
this unicorn. And I thought that was legitimate feedback and he took it to heart. But it goes to this whole credence of how much does it need to look like that founder has the chops to take this all the way to the end?
it doesn't. And just so we're saying the same thing, it is very commonplace for the founder to hand the reins off to someone else. I'll also argue, and it usually doesn't go well, right? I mean, that's the irony of it is like the feeling is that there's this super experienced person that could come in and do the job so much better. And the idea is that once we get this silly founder out of the way with all this lack of experience, new person, hired gun mercenary will come in and do everything right. I see that fail so damn often, right? Or let me give you an example, right, of someone who was wildly capable of being the CEO and has nothing to show for it. Tim Cook. Okay, now, when I say that, I have a massive amount of respect for Tim Cook.
Sure.
Okay, but Tim Cook hasn't launched a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Right. And
Very
he's
true.
been there for a few years, right? And so you look at it and you say, operationally, Tim Cook's the man, right? I mean, Apple is in the money printing business, okay? But if you look at the roadmap of Apple and say, okay, you did the iPhone 1,000 years ago. What have you done since? There's nothing. Johnny Ive's gone, right? They're not doing anything, right?
Yeah. The Apple Vision Pro tanked. I would say on his watch, they launched the Apple TV, which is losing about $1 billion a year. Like
A
nothing to
giant
write home
miss,
about. Yeah.
right? My point is the fantasy is that you can replace the founder DNA with executive DNA. And honestly, for some companies, that actually is the right next step. Okay. I'll give you a counterexample. When Uber got rid of Travis, Travis is the only reason that Uber got to where Uber is. That guy was just an absolute bull in a china shop. But when that company started to become a big company, he was a massive liability for that company, right? And they saw it. They brought Dara in and like killed it, right? I mean, really did so many things right. Okay. I'm not saying you can't bring someone in. Founder to founder, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Travis at Uber. But what I'm saying is that it's rare. Like the next person that comes in can be a great executive and manage board meetings, but also isn't Travis.
I'm glad you brought this up because I like to fire back at this all the time. I had a founder and she was great. I thought she was fantastic. And this investor, he was kind of a douche. Okay.
Yeah.
And he says to her, I don't see you having the executive presence to raise an A round.
Yeah.
Right. And he just throws that out there. And she was like, she was polite about it and she was debriefing me and I fired back at her. Or I was like, you know what you should have said is like, what does it even matter raising an A round? How about I demonstrate for you that I can get traction as I've already been demonstrating to get us to the point where we have product market fit. The signs are there. What do you want? Right. I thought it was a complete asinine argument. And again, this back to your point previously, investors will do that just to give you a hard time.
Yeah, well, also that's one person's opinion, right? I'll give you another example. When we were growing my ad agency, I wanted so badly to backfill myself with somebody that actually knew anything. Okay. So I was like 25, 26. By this point, I'm so long ago. By this point, we've got maybe a few hundred people, right? Enough that like we have real infrastructure and we need to go hire a few hundred more. So we're about to have a lot of people. And I was brutally immature by my own admission. So we went to go find my replacement for a very long time. We finally found the person. At one hand, I'm 25 years old at a time when it wasn't cool to be 25 and a CEO. Like we hadn't been invented yet. And there's a huge credibility gap. We bring the CEO in and he's got all the credentials and he tanks. And so I'm already starting my next thing, right? I'm gone. My business partner is like, we kind of need you back. And I'm like, shit, didn't see that coming. So I come back and I'm doing my thing. We're growing the business again. And I'm like, but I really wanted to leave. Can we go find someone else? We finally find someone else. I leave again. I get pulled back again because that person didn't work out. Like, wow. I didn't even want to be there. I was literally starting another company. And I kept getting pulled back, not because I'm special, but because there's something about the founder DNA that you can't overlook. You can't hire for the founder DNA. It doesn't work.
And that's come back recently with this whole founder mode sort of thing. It's like, let's ignore the investors. Let's ignore the markets. Let's go back into founder mode. And I think Well, the moral of the story is, correct me if I'm wrong, don't worry about trying to look like that executive that's going to run a 3,000 person company. You're not there yet. Do your thing at the early stages. And yeah, sure, it helps, but quite often it'll work against you if you got all this, like you got an MBA and you're like, hey, I can run a Fortune 500 company. Don't worry about it. That's not what investors should be looking for. Maybe some might say they do, but don't worry about it. That's what I'm taking away from this.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I wouldn't say this in the interview back then, but I might say it now. If I were interviewing for the same person, my first interview question would have been, "What have you built?" Right?
Yeah.
Because I built something. I might not be that experienced, but only one of us in this room has built something, right? And I don't say that lightly or to be offensive to that person. What I'm saying is, I need somebody that builds. I don't want to hire somebody to replace me that's never built a goddamn thing. Right. And if you think about it in that context, Tim Cook never built a goddamn thing. And again, I love Tim Cook. So this isn't me knocking Tim Cook, but he doesn't have that same DNA that Jobs does. And it's nearly impossible to replicate that. And I'm not saying you can't find someone that can run a business, but I think when you want to talk about how to create and build a company, it's often a different person.
Everyone wants you to really double click on this one is to stop and look at the investor. We're talking about what investors look for, but look at the investor, look at their background, their context, where they're coming from, because there's a lot of investors out there that don't understand what it means to be a founder. Yes, it's necessary. They exist, but takes what they say with a grain of salt.
And I say this too to say, also remember the person that's telling you this, the investor, what have you built? I was always very cautious about how I said this in a meeting because I didn't want to come across like a total douchebag, which apparently I had.
You failed, Will.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't be the first or last time. When the investor would ask me a question about my business, like the business I was trying to build, and I knew that they didn't know as much of the business as I did, I would always kind of passive aggressively pass it back to them. And I would say, when you were in my position, what did you do?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Or when you built a company like this, how did you handle it? And obviously it was a little passive aggressive, but I can open it up to say, when have you personally dealt with this problem? Right? Doesn't mean you built the company. I don't have to set it up like this, right? But if they're like, you'll never be able to get customer acquisition under $50 a head, I'll be like, cool. Where have you seen that to be true? And they might come back and say, I'm on the board of a company that does exactly this, and we're dealing with exactly that problem. And sometimes that's the case, which is why I leave it open-ended and not assumptive that you couldn't have done it. I want to know where you've gotten that fact from. Because by the way, investors make shit up all the time.
Oh, man. No true words have been spoken, Will.